has come. Good to see y'all. And we're going to get into, as it says, the reconciliation of all things in the false doctrine of hell. For those of you who do know me and have heard my testimony before, and for those of you who don't, the reason that I decided I wanted to get into this was because of the suicide death of my oldest son in 2011. And I had a lot of questions, as you could imagine, like anybody would in a particular situation like that, or even whether we've just lost, family or friends or relatives. And we ask those questions based on the knowledge that has been given to us from the places that we came from. For those of us that have been here at Knott's Reign Life for quite a long time, or walking in this walk, and that walked out of Babylon, you know who we're talking about. We're talking about what we refer to over here as the circus. And those are the false church fathers and the false church system, okay? And what they've placed on us throughout our entire life. And so one of the things that I've always gotten into in my walk and in my studies that I learned while I was walking in the church in Southern California for 20 years was that I was really interested in turning everything over and leaving no doors closed and considering everything as a lie and always trying to find the truth in it and just diving deeper. So, like I mentioned earlier, questions or comments, we'll keep them to the end because I want to go through all these slides, and we're just going to read this information that comes directly out of Scripture. And it's not going to have our opinion or an injection in it unless we think that there's a particular place or position that we want to take with that, showing the true character of the Father and his Son, and maybe being able to outline or identify some things that have been placed in this that we don't need to be listening to anymore, that we need to start to remove from this book, when we start to discover the secrets of Yahushua. Okay, so we're going to get this thing going and start walking in this. And once again, I want to thank you all for coming. And I hope everybody gets something out of this, like I have, and we can just continue to grow in it. Okay, guys. In the reconciliation of all things in Colossians 1:19 through 20, it says, "Because in him all the fullness was well pleased to dwell, and through him to completely restore to favor all to himself, whether on the Eretz or in the Shamayim, having made peace through the blood of his stake." Now, if we take this scripture seriously, if we literally believe that this is exactly what's coming, the words that are coming out of our Father's mouth and out of the mouth of Yahushua, this doctrine, the false doctrine of hell, creates a conflict and a contradiction. Okay, and that's what we're going to try to break down in this thing. And we're going to look at sin and the cause of sin in this, okay? John 1:1 through 3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, and he was in the beginning with Elohim. All came to be through him, and without him, not even one came to be that came to be. So let's get into this meat and potatoes. We're going to look at sin and the cause of sin, but I want to explain a couple of other things here first. The false doctrine of hell. This little work is written for the purpose of furnishing a sketch of the argument by which it is shown that the doctrine of endless punishment is not of divine origin, okay, but traceable directly to heathen sources. It is not intended as an elaborately philosophical or critical discussion of the subject, as the size of the volume will show, but only a popular presentation of the method of proof and of the leading facts and authorities of which the argument rests upon. So we're just going to dissect this using some guys, some Orthodox leaders, church leaders, and theologians from the 19th century, and also some from the 21st century, who are going to tell us right out of their own mouths that this whole thing is an absolute lie. But they still pump it. Okay, they're still putting it out there. The following two positions will be admitted without question, and it's believed by all professing Christians. First, if the doctrine of endless punishment be, as affirmed by its believers, absolutely and indispensably necessary to the preservation of virtue and to perfect obedience to the laws of Yahuwah, If this be the salutary and saving influence of the doctrine, then it constitutes one of the strongest possible reasons for it being revealed to man at the very earliest period of the world's world's history or existence. It's nowhere in any of the sin and the consequence of sin that we're going to see as we move through the Old Testament. If endless punishment be true, it is terribly true to all those who are in danger, wherein is found another powerful reason why it should have been made known in the clearest of manner, or on the very morning of creation, and nothing. It was complete silence. Clearest manner, it should not have been left in doubt or obscurity by the use of indefinite terms, but it should have been proclaimed in language which no man could misunderstand if he would, rather than there should even be the possibility of a mistake in a mistake in a matter of such vast and fearful moment. It should have been graven by special miracle into every soul that Yahuwah sent into the world. It should be so plainly obvious to us. Every time we pick up that book, it should have been somewhere. Okay? Sin and punishment in the temporal realm. This is something that, when I started looking at these scriptures, really shocked me, because the idea of hell is not in the Old Testament. It's placed on it through seminary school and theological beliefs, and we're taught this stuff, and we just automatically assume and believe that it's in the Old Testament when it's nowhere to be found, when we really sit down and start looking at the cause and effect of the sin that happens in our lives and the sin that happened in their lives. This is their account of it, okay? And we're going to look at the literal accounts of this, okay? And we can start in Genesis, which is where we're going to start, because that's the best place to start. We're right from the beginning, okay? And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For in that day that you eat of it, you shall surely die, okay? He gives them a warning, a stern warning at that particular moment, right from the get-go. No questions asked, but nothing else other than that you will surely die. Hey, Tad and Mom, good to see you guys. Okay, and Genesis 3, 1 through 7. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahuwah had made. And he said to the Asha, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the Asha said to the serpent, we are to eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it or touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the Asha, you shall certainly not die, for Elohim knows that in that day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the Asha saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eye, and a tree to make one wise. And she took of the fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. So there we've got the act. Then there comes the consequence of the act. Okay. Genesis 3, 11 through 20. And he said, who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, the Asha, whom you gave to me, as he sloughs it off, she gave me of the tree and I ate it. And Yahuwah Elohim said to the Asha, what is this that you have done? And the Asha said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. And Yahuwah Elohim said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly are you to go, and you're to eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the Asha, and between your seed and her seed. he shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. And to the Asha he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain, and your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your Asha, and have eaten of the tree of which I have commanded you, saying, do not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil, and in toil, excuse me for 1 second. In toil, and you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles, and you shall eat of the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you return. And the man called his Asha's name Kua, because she became the mother of all living things. That's it, guys. There's nothing else that he added to that about a consequence of sin after the act of breaking his laws. Okay. Genesis 3:21 through 24. And Yahuwah, okay. And Yahuwah Elohim made coats of skin for Yahuwah coats of skin for the man and his Asha, and dressed them. And Yahuwah Elohim said, see, the man has become one discerning to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Yahuwah Elohim sent him out of the garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. And he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim in the east of the garden of Eden, and a flaming sword turning every which way, to guard the way back to the tree. So that was it. There was no mention about anything else that was being placed upon them for the sin that they committed against him. Funny thing about that too, when we notice that Hasatan, who we already know after a war waged in heaven, was cast down to the earth, and he's going to be locked in chains. Okay. When that act actually happened, he was not given any information that eventually he was going to be cast into a lake of fire, burning in torture and torment for all eternity. Okay, that wasn't even mentioned to him at that particular point in time or moment. Okay, this is something that comes in later as we get into the New Testament. That's where this creeps in. All right. Are we not yet? Okay. I think I got a little off track here. Yeah, I did, because she was supposed to be doing this. So sorry, we're going to get this figured out eventually, guys. Bear with us. Okay, the second human sin. We're going to try to, this is in a little in chronological order, but I kind of jumped a little bit just to make the point of what it is that we're actually looking at here. We do all the cause and effect and the sin, that there's no mention anywhere of this stuff. Okay, Genesis 4 through 16, but I think it's like I mentioned, it's important to read this stuff so that we know exactly what it is that we're looking at, and we're not injecting anything into this from our previous belief systems. Okay, that's what breaks this whole thing down, and it contradicts the character of Yahuwah and his son, and it contradicts the word, and that's what we're trying to weed out. We're trying to weed out this bad stuff that doesn't need to be there anymore. Okay, and Abel also brought the firstborn of the flock and their fat. And Yahuwah looked at Abel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering. And Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Yahuwah said to Cain, why are you wroth, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. And make no misunderstanding, guys. I know there's a lot of scripture here and a lot of different things that we can go off the beaten path and talk about, because it's just full of information. But the idea is to focus solely on the false doctrine of hell and then the reconciliation of all things, without getting off into these other tangents that we like to get into when we're hanging out with Mark. Okay. Why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it, or Adonai it. And Cain told Abel his brother, and it came to be when they went into the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And Yahuwah said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know, and my brother's guardian. Continuing in verse 10, and he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the Eretz, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And if you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the Eretz. And Cain said to Yahuwah, my punishment is too great to bear. See, you have driven me from the face of the ground today, and I'm hidden from your face, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the Eretz. And it shall be that anyone who finds me shall kill me. But Yahuwah, having compassion on him, said to him, well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taken on him sevenfold. That's kind of interesting. And that's one of those topics for another time. But this is the character, the true character of the Most High that we need to start paying really close attention to. Well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taken out on him sevenfold. And Yahuwah set up a sign for Cain, lest anyone find him and kill him. So Cain went out from the presence of Yahuwah and dwelt in the land of Nob on the east of Eden. That's it, guys. There was nothing else added to anything there. It was the sin, the cause and effect of that, and the punishment for that within the temporal realm, and only in the temporal realm, as you'll notice right here, looking at that neat looking little gecko. Okay, not a word or a syllable is mentioned in regard to the consequence of eternal torture or torment when their sentence is handed down by Yahuwah in the temporal life or afterward in the eternal realm. To the points that I want to try to make as we walk through and recognize the sin and the consequence for that sin. And we can see this throughout the entire scripture in the Old Testament, regardless of where you go. If you go to First Kings or Second Kings, First Samuel, Second Samuel, anywhere where they're talking about these conflicts that go on, it's always because of the consequence of disobeying the Most High's simple request. Do as I ask you to do, you'll be blessed. And if you don't, then you're going to be, you're going to suffer the consequence of that. Okay. You're going to be okay out there. Okay. The second human sin, which was murder in the first degree, certainly a crime noteworthy of mention in regards to the idea of eternal torture and torment for all eternity. But Yahuwah is completely silent in this, guys. Okay. Both in the temporal and the heavenly realms, not a single word or a syllable is mentioned. And that's a really key thing to remember, because we've been taught all our lives that, from the Jesuits, that this is what happens when you pass away. This is where you're going to go. Well, how did that all slip into the equation, right? Well, that's usually through pagan belief, which becomes a social ideology, and then it becomes a very common thought process, something that we toss around every day. Like what were we mentioning early from the Christian church that we were talking about that we do that with? Oh, the concept of the rapture. Okay. That became a very common thought process throughout all Christianity, that there was going to be a pre-tribulation rapture. That's how it gets started. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's talking about the doctrine of hell, or if it's talking about a false rapture that they take out of context, or whatever it is that might be taken out of context in scripture, it eventually just becomes a common thought within us, within our minds and within our social environments that we live in. And that's how this stuff gets started. Sitting around campfires telling stories, and then the next thing you know, everybody's talking about it because it's been spread all over the planet, and that's a very dangerous thing. Was all this just a terrible mistake? Could the Father of all creation simply have forgot to mention something of such an everlasting consequence for all humanity? One might consider something of such a magnitude that it could have perhaps deterred all of his creation from sinning ever against them. I know that would have been a big deterrent for me had I heard this, or read this, not heard it, but read it in the scripture, when I started picking up the book and looking at it myself and not letting them teach me anymore, you know. And we find out that we're being lied to when we start asking those kinds of questions, like, why isn't this in the Old Testament? You know, or why are they using these particular certain words? Why were the names changed? You know, and then the lie and the cover up, and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. Okay. Human sin number 3, the deluge, or the destruction of all things. Genesis 6, and the sins of the watchers as they came down from the Shemaim, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. Picking up in verse 3, Yahuwah says, my Ruach shall not strive with man forever in his going astray. His flesh and his days shall be 120 years. And we know there's a really big story in that too, which is a really good one, actually. They're actually all really good stories. Again, a warning, he gives them a warning. Okay. Verse 5, and Yahuwah saw the wickedness of man was great in the Eretz, and that every inclination, the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yahuwah was sorry that he made man on the Eretz, and he was grieved in his heart. That is so monumental, what he says there, that he was sorry that he had made man on the Eretz, and that he was grieved in his heart. That's just unbelievable. Those are, unbelievable words coming from the creator of all things, with the love and the compassion that he has for us, that he would actually feel that way and come to that conclusion that he was going to have to wipe us all out because it was so wicked and evil. Genesis 6:7, and Yahuwah said, I'm going to wipe off man whom I've created from the face of the Eretz, both man and beast, creeping creature, and the birds of the Shemaim, for I'm sorry that I have made them. Once again, a stunning declaration from him. Okay. Surely this act of complete wickedness in all humanity is the final act that will bring about the declaration of eternal torture and torment for those who have sinned so grievously against the Most High. And then there were 8, Genesis 7:13 through 14. And on that same Yom, Noah and Shem and Ham and Yosef, Japheth, the son of Noah, and Noah's Asha, and the 3 wives of his son with them went into the ark, they and every living creature after its kind, and every beast after its kind, and every creeping creature that creeps on the eretz after its kind, and every bird after its kind. Every bird after its kind, and every bird of every sort. And in verse 16, and Yahuwah shut him in. Verse 22, and all those whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit, the Ruach of life, all that was on dry land died. Everything. Funny thing that was missing from that, though, there's no mention of anything that lived in the sea. That's another rabbit hole, guys. Genesis 7:23 through 24. So he wiped off all its stands, which are on the face of the ground, both man and beast, creeping creature, and the birds of the Shemaim, and they were wiped off the eretz, and only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. And the Maims, or the waters, were mighty on the eretz for 150 days. In this astonishing account of the destruction of all the things whose nostrils was the breath of life in them, all life was wiped out on land except Noah and his family. In verse 8, in verse 8 of Genesis, as Noah and his family leave the ark on the dry ground once again to start anew with Yahuwah, not a word or syllable is given as an instruction to Noah and his family about the future eternal consequence of sin against Yahuwah and his commandments, resulting in eternal torture and torment. But we do know that there are some conditions that come with that, and especially for capital murder at that particular time. Okay. So continuing with the second edition of the False Doctrine of Hell, we'll take a deeper look at the consequence of sin and some other sins in the temporal realm, and the absence, once again, of any mention in the topic of hell or eternal hell, torture or torment. And we're going to look at some really good things that are once again going pretty much in line here with the sin and the consequence of sin as we move through the Old Testament and start to get into the definition of words and what they actually really mean and how they've been twisted to be something that they're not actually, that they have actually nothing to do with. And we're going to use a lot of the words in the Strong's Concordance and things like that to be able to bring this to light. Okay, so we're going to open it up now, guys. I hope I didn't go too fast. I want to apologize to Shelly here, who was working with me on this, and we forgot to kind of give each other a little clue. Okay, stop. It's my turn now. So we will definitely do that on the next one, because I really want her in here because she has some really great notes that she took, and maybe she might want to share some of those with everybody. Okay. Yeah, that would be a good idea. I'll let her talk for a little while. I'll be quiet, and she can throw something in here. Okay.
No, actually, I need your help.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. So William put this wonderful presentation together, and he is kind enough to have invited me to sit with him and share some of the slides. So when I thought that's what I was going to do, I read the slides he wanted me to read, and I did have a little bit of Yahusha perhaps showing me some things. And I just wanted to share those. He did touch on some, and I'm curious if any of you had the same thinking while you were following along. And everybody can see that, right? Everybody can see the slide? Yep, thanks.
You want to make it bigger?
No. Thanks. So with sin crept in, it was just, for me, I also heard, so that's when deception crept in, and that's when manipulation crept in. You want to take it a little further and be a little specific with it. Of course, there's a gamut of sin, but it made me think when Brother Mark, when we read this scripture, he likes to point out that it was just one word that the serpent used to deceive Kua, and it's that word not. And so you shall certainly not die. And so for me, when I saw that, I said, that is exactly the beginnings of, how we say the funky monks in the Roman Catholic Church changed scripture to suit their agenda. And so that was the sin crept in thought that I had with that slide. And we're speaking to the characteristics of Yahuwah. So for slide 8, Genesis 3:11 through 20, I was reading through it, and the punishment that was given to Adam and Kua. And I thought, well, so they sinned, Yahuwah gave them their punishment. And then I had this, little funny thought go through my head where it was, all that consequence you suffered while on the arrets? Well, now you're also going to burn in an unquenchable fire for all eternity. It's not enough that you're going to have the temporal punishment, but then you're going to burn in this unquenchable fire. It just seems to be outside of his character. And as William spoke to, a sort of manipulative tool to attempt to cause one to not want anything to do with the Most High. And we know the Most High is loving and compassionate, and it just seems to contradict his character. And I saw also Yahuwah's compassion. So Adam and Kua sinned against the Most High. And what does he do? He clothes them. He shows compassion, and he covers them with coats of skin. He knows that they're now living in a fallen world, and he shows compassion. He doesn't stand there and tell them how they're going to burn in this eternal fire. And the discipline he gave to them is an act of love. You're going to till the ground, but, that's because I'm a just Elohim. And this you sinned, and this is your punishment for that.
Once again, a part of its character is
Exactly.
attributes. Yeah.
Yes. And then the last comment that I had, speaking again to Yahuwah's character, is the punishment for Cain's sin was delivered by Yahuwah. He delivered it. Cain sinned. He murdered his brother. And not only did he not get, blasted with a ball of fire even in that moment, again, there was compassion from Yahuwah stating that there would be vengeance 7 times if anybody were to kill Cain. I mean, he had a conversation with Cain. What are you doing? That is his long suffering. That is his patience and his everlasting love. So I think further down the line, we're going to get into my next thoughts a little bit more, but I'm really starting to see that, or I really believe I am seeing that the eternal punishment is where it speaks to, I am hidden from your face, and that he went out from the presence of Yahuwah. For me, knowing that I will not be able to exist in eternity with Yahuwah is the eternal punishment. And those were just some things that we saw. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we continue to walk through this, like I said, we're going to see a lot in his character, his true attributes that we all here already know about, but we need to kind of build maybe on a little bit as we start to remove this fallacy that's been placed on us through this false doctrine of hell, and simply rely on the scripture for what it says, take it word for word, and we all know here, we should all know here, that there is scripture that we can literally take word for word. And then there's some that you're kind of like, it's kind of seems like there have been some funky monks playing with that, back at the monastery. So, that's just the process of being able to walk through this and leave this stuff out. So, Doug, I'm sure you've got some burning desire to share something, or ask a question. If anybody does, please feel free, guys. Now's the time.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you there, Bill, but I'm just digesting what you just presented, and I know it's a beginning of our conversation. So as we get further along, I'm sure that what you bring out later will reflect on this and may be discussion points at that point.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that's it. I really wanted to kind of take this in a slow pace so that we can really look at each sin and the consequence of that sin. We're going to get into suicide, dysfunctional families. The Beverly Hillbillies are going to be in it. The Beverly Hills Housewives of Hollywood are going to be in it. We're gonna put some things in there that are just going to be kind of characteristic to everybody's character. That's the dysfunctionality that's going on in Scripture. And kind of try to make it a little fun, but it's always just about bringing the main point to it. But doing it slow enough that we can take all this in, because it needs to be looked at. I needed personally to look at it from a very slow pace, so I made sure that I didn't overlook anything. And it's not the complete masterwork. This is just throwing the best that we put together out there right now. Yes, we could always go deeper. We could probably find more information, but it's pretty simple when we look at it from the point of Scripture. Go ahead there, Tad. Can't hear you, brother. Can't hear you.
I have a question that I don't know how it necessarily relates, and there has nothing to do with the doctrine of hell, because like you said, we kind of all understand that. It has to do with the compassion of Yahuwah, and it's just one of those questions that kind of makes you go, because he showed compassion to Cain for murder in the first degree, and yet later on, there were times that people sinned against him that they were killed immediately. What comes to mind is Aharon's 2 sons when they brought strange fire. And why were they killed when he didn't punish Cain in such a way. And the other one that came immediately to mind was the man that was gathering sticks on Shabbat. And why was he punished? Were those just examples that he wanted to set for people? It just something that makes you go, why did he show compassion to Cain and not those people?
That's always been a really good question, I think, for everybody when we think about those things. And I probably don't have the definitive 100% answer, but when I have looked at those particular accounts, I think it was more as a witness to the other people. This is what I said, this is what I meant, and now you're going to see the consequence of that action. Even though when we're thinking about like the guy picking up the sticks, it's like, that's just nuts. Okay, did it have to be so extreme? Okay, remember, we're talking about a group of people at that particular time in history that were so rebellious and so lost in their way that sometimes drastic measures are you know what I'm saying. Drastic measures are necessary to bring us around and bring us to bridle us and to bring us back into obedience. But we see that all throughout Scripture. Every time Israel's doing something and it gets to the point where he's so fed up that he writes them a certificate of divorce. I'm done. I've had this. I can't do this anymore. I got a better plan. I'm just going to go with that. You guys go do whatever, it's all going to come out in the wash anyways. But yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. You got anything on that?
I might be incorrect, but I was thinking, so Adam and Kua, they broke a commandment, and the two examples Tad brought up, which I really struggled with the whole death of the man picking up the sticks when I was first reading that, but I'm wondering, those both are directly against Yahuwah as far as like a belief. I'm wondering if Yahuwah was like, you didn't believe that I would provide for your family on this day that I said, rest. And, the man was more worried. He felt that he had to be the one to take care of the family and not Yahuwah. And then the other murder, the strange fire, again, that's, directly against Yahuwah, having another Elohim before his face. Perhaps. I don't know. Those are just thoughts.
You want to finish up, Tad? Go ahead.
So yeah, I was thinking, just to follow up, that's very possible that he had given them direct orders. And it wasn't very long after that they decided to disobey. Like you said, that's the one. And so he set an example, had to set that precedence, is the only thing I can come up with. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, go ahead, sister.
I was going to say, in addition to what everyone else has given in thought, Yahuwah says he has mercy on whom he will. And I think it summarizes that for the wages of sin is death. And although Kua and Adam didn't get immediate die right then and there, they still didn't make one day with Yahuwah at that time. Concerning the ones that he was training in the wilderness, when he brought forth death unto certain ones, I understand what you're saying about the false doctrine of hell. Because it says when we sin against him, our wage is death. Didn't say our wage is hell. So I agree with that so far. But I'm thinking that sometimes he gives instant judgment, and sometimes our judgments are prolonged. And who are we to say, why did you do this? Shall the pot say to the potter, why did you do it this way then and that way then? It's up to him when he is going to go and give his mercy on certain ones and on certain. We may not understand it all. We understand as he allows us to understand. But one scripture has been studying is about he that thinks he stand, take heed lest he fall. You know what I'm saying? So basically, we are to in knowledge of all of what we are saying right now, we are to make sure we are endeavoring to be obedient. That's the ultimate goal, that we are being obedient and that we're teaching obedient and that we example the word. Because that's what our ultimate goal is right now.
Exactly.
We are now his Mishkan, his body in which we worship him in our bodies and in our ruachs. That's all I would like to add.
Thanks, sister.
Thanks for
Appreciate it.
listening.
Somebody asked, Gene asked the question, with Cain, had there been a command prior to the sin? And I would personally would have to say yes, because I believe that the 10 Commandments already existed when they came out of the garden. Okay. And so, yeah, I would believe thou shalt not kill was already made very plain to them. Anybody else? Comment or question? Okay, if everybody's good, then, oh, wait. Yeah, I know there's no scriptural reference other than that they ate from the tree. And this is one of the things that I've seen through my walk in the last 27 years, that we will take some things at face value without actually having the scripture there. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad way of looking at things. Tad, I think you can add something to that, though, can't you, about that in the scripture about the 10 Commandments?
Not necessarily the 10 Commandments, but I do know that there was scriptural reference to the offering. It definitely refers to the offering that he brought was incorrect, which led to him eventually murdering his brother because it upset him, because Abel brought the correct offering. It does say that in the scripture, and that Cain did not. And that led directly to that murder in the first degree.
That could be a very good point, that it was through that cause and effect that it caused Cain to stumble and make a really bad choice. Yeah, jealousy, exactly. That could be a very good point there. Once again, there is no scripture that says that the 10 Commandments were there on the seventh day, on the seventh day that they rested. Okay, I don't have that. I don't think anybody has that. We assume that, and maybe that's a bad thing to do, is to assume that they came out of the garden with them. But me personally, I would tend to believe that they were always there in creation. Okay, go ahead, Sandra. I know you got something to add to that.
I would say that it's inferred, because as they were written by the hands of Yahuwah, thou shalt not murder is listed as one of them. So that inference is there that they broke all 10 of them just by disobeying the one not to partake of that tree. And remember that tree is teachings,
Right,
of the knowledge of good and of evil, and listening to the deceiver tell her that she became idolatrous, because she was lusting after that fruit, thinking it was good to look upon and such things like that. So that's how the enemy used her own lust that war within her member to even convince her to break that.
I think Gene kind of nailed it too. That is an attribute of him. The 10 Commandments are attributes of him. So how could they not have existed from the beginning? Okay, that's what this whole thing comes from. The whole plan. Exactly. Go ahead, Tad.
I forgot completely that there is scriptural reference that backs up that the 10 Commandments were there from the beginning. It's right in in Yehukanan 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He came in the beginning, and we know the Word is Yahusha, but we also know that it's the Torah. He is the living Torah.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and continue on. He was in the beginning with Elohim. All came to be through him, and without him, not even one came to be that came to be. So,
Exactly.
I mean, that kind of gives a reference that the commandments were there from the very get-go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, second slide. Should have remembered. Should have had a V8.
It was in my notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, guys. Anybody else got anything? And if not, we're going to go ahead and we'll call this a wrap on our first attempt at doing this. It will get better. We will get better at it. I will make sure to include her in this because she's got some really good things to say and some good input on this. I think we got another perhaps question in the thanks, Jean. We appreciate you, sister.
Thank you, Brother Sister Shelley and Brother William.
It's our pleasure. We're having a great time putting this together, and I'm really excited about doing it with her and her being able to share it with me and us being able to share it with you guys. So from all over the world, over there in the Netherlands and everywhere else across the America or wherever anybody might be. Thanks again for coming, everybody. No more questions. Nobody has a question or comment before we go?